Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Debunked. It's been a very long time since I've been in the studio, but as always, I'm delighted to be joined by Moulana Sulaimaan Ravat. Moulana, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Debunked.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muhammad, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, and you, Moulana, it's been
A long while.
many months since we've been
Too
together
long.
for a show. I think our last show was our December series, and we're almost at the end of another year.
Can't believe how quick time goes, eh?
Yeah, just thinking about it, last year this time we were in our old studios in Houghton. We've moved studios, we've got new sets, and now our first show together in the new studio. But in any case, I think it's an important topic we're going to be discussing today, something that's working on my mind in a bit overdrive at the moment, which is a topic on marriage. And I think it's important just to maybe refresh our viewers also on some of the rules, some of the regulations, some of what marriage is all about. And it's a lesson to us also. Maybe we forget sometimes.
It's an evergreen topic, isn't it? All the time, anytime, anywhere, everywhere, there will be an interest, and there has to be an interest, and there should be an interest in the topic of marriage. And I normally say when we talk about marriage as well, that people tend to think, the ones who are yet to get married, they must listen. Or the ones whose marriage is in trouble on the rocks, they must listen. Of course, they've got to, heed advice, but even those of us who are relatively happily married, there's always room for improvement. If we were to run a show on how to optimize profits in your business, even the profitable businessman will say, well, okay, let me check what this is about. Let me see. Maybe I know 9 out of the 10 things that they're discussing, but maybe the 10th thing will help me to boost my profits even further. So our approach and attitude towards marriage should be like that, how can I make it even better?
You know, so many times, and because of social media and the TikToks we're all watching and the videos from the many ulama, we've been hearing these terms of Mawaddah and Rahmah. And so many of the talks that we've heard mention Mawaddah and Rahmah. How can couples practically cultivate these topics of Mawaddah and Rahmah? Because the Quran doesn't mention you should love your wife or you should fall in love. It mentions Mawaddah and Rahmah.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the Quran takes a particular approach to marriage and how you would see it in the movies or in the novels, the hyper romanticized aspect of it. Like you say, it's all about the dating and the falling in love. And here you've got these two concepts of Mawaddah and Rahmah. For me, to answer the question about how to practically implement it, I think it starts with a mindset shift. Because practicalities don't come even if the mindset is not properly aligned. Now, if from the onset you understand that marriage is an institution, okay, in light of what's been happening in Gaza for almost 2 years, I've been saying this often whenever I'm officiating at nikahs these days, that we all talk about unity. But unity doesn't happen from the top down, it happens from the bottom up. So if husband and wife are not united, then the family is not united. If the family is not united, communities are not united, and so it goes on. So unity starts right there. And that's why Islam has put so much of emphasis on it. That this is not, Mawaddah and Rahmah means, in many ways, that this is not about you. It's not about you. That's why, if you and I want to do a transaction, even if it's for R1 billion, you don't need to come into the masjid and you don't need to say specific words, etc., etc. We come to a common understanding and the deal is concluded. Because if that deal goes sour, the consequences are material and it's limited between the two of us. When a marriage works, it's the coming together of two families, and that becomes the cornerstone of a functional society, and that becomes the foundation of a strong ummah, a united ummah. When a marriage breaks, and you would know this, you see it all the time in our community, in our society, when a marriage breaks, it's actually two families then that at times drift apart or even become very hostile and aggressive towards each other. So what's the consequence of that? The unity of the ummah suffers, the strength of the ummah suffers. So Mawaddah and Rahmah means it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the institution of marriage. It's about families. It's about the community. It's about the ummah. And your commitment is to Allah. Now, when your commitment is to Allah, then your mindset will be one of, how can I be a better spouse? Not that I'm waiting for my wife, or the wife is waiting for the husband to be a better partner, then I'll be better. No, because I have to answer to Allah. And in the court of Allah, I can't have an excuse and say, Allah, well, my wife didn't make an effort, so I didn't. Or my husband, was falling short, so why did I have to do what I needed to do? Each one of us is separately responsible to Allah for our commitment to that particular marriage. So when your intention is clean, when your attitude and mindset is right, then to bring the practicalities of Mawaddah and Rahmah becomes much easier. And when those two things are out of alignment, then no matter how many talks you listen to, or how many books you will read, or how many definitions of Mawaddah and Rahmah you'll get, or how many examples will be enlisted before you, you'll never get to practically implement it because the mindset is not right.
You mentioned so many important points, and something that we see is the disunity of families when a marriage breaks. And as you've correctly mentioned, it's the disunity of the ummah then. Coming back to another bit of advice, that what is one piece of advice from Quran and Sunnah that you'll give to for people who are married, people who are going to be getting married? What's one piece of advice that we can use practically in our lives?
Taqwa. And that's the same advice that you get when the nikah is being solemnized. The verses that are recited by the person officiating is verses of taqwa, not verses of nikah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة. The hadith that comes, النكاح من سنتي, you hear the word nikah. Why? Two reasons. One is that what I've just explained, that when the husband takes the wife into marriage and when the wife accepts the husband into her nikah, you make a commitment to Allah before you make a commitment to each other. So you're answerable to Allah. You see, marriage is a very private thing. Many times, even the closest friends, the closest relatives don't know what's happening there, good or bad, right? But Allah knows. So the first thing about taqwa is that consciousness that how I'm treating my wife, Allah is watching, and I will have to account. How I'm treating my husband, Allah is watching, I will have to account. The second thing is this: the stronger your relationship with Allah, the more there will be barakah in your marriage. I always give this example of a question I asked Moulana Yunus Patel Rahmatullah Ali many years ago when I interviewed him on the radio. It was the opening question. So he would agree to come on for an hour. There was no topic. You ask him whatever you want. And the opening question I asked him was, why are we seeing so many marriages fail? And he said, it's because we don't have taqwa. Yes, incompatibility is there, infidelity is there, financial neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all of those things are there. But the fundamental problem is this, that no matter how in love you are, how compatible you are, if you don't have taqwa, if Allah is not happy with you, Allah withdraws His barakah and blessings. And the first relationship that gets affected is your marriage, because it's the most intimate relationship. So you said, what is the one aspect from Quran and Sunnah? I would say taqwa, your relationship with Allah is what will bring that barakah and blessings into your marriage, and your sense of accountability to Allah will help you to become a better spouse.
Something you mentioned that hit home is that marriage is very private, and so many times your friends, your family don't know what's happening behind those four walls. On the outside, things may be looking very rosy, but we are living in a world where so many people have multiple friends. Our families are so big. How can couples set those boundaries to ensure their marriage remains successful and their marriage is a priority?
Marriage is meant to be an intimate affair, not only in the physical sense, but in every other aspect. You do not disclose the challenges. Okay, park the challenges for once. Even the boundaries of your marriage, it's not something to be disclosed. It's not for you to tell everybody how your husband is spoiling you, how your husband is indulging you, because nazar is a reality, hasad, jealousy is a reality, and sometimes you think, well, it's my friend. Sometimes you think, well, it's my sister, it's my brother. You know, this aspect of hasad and jealousy and nazar is more, you see it being perpetrated more by those closest to you. Now, I'm not saying this so that you can start accusing people or suspecting people around you. I'm saying this so that we can take greater precaution. I always say this, that whatever bounty Allah blesses you upon or blesses you with, it's nobody else's business, not even your parents' business. You don't have to tell them everything. Yeah, you can give them this much indication, alhamdulillah, I'm happy, right? Because they are your parents after all, they want to know that you're happy. But you don't have to go into every detail. Oh, you know, he bought me this. Oh, you know, he did this. Oh, he's so sweet. Oh, he sent me a message. Oh, you know what, she cooked for me this. Oh, that is between you, your spouse, and Allah. So even the positive, keep it private. And then more so the negative. When there is, you know, abuse, and when you require intervention, then you go outside of the boundaries of the marriage, but to the right people, not necessarily to the closest people. I always say, that a woman may go to her father thinking, well, that's my father. But if your father is temperamental, so you've got an issue, and your father's temper now complicates the issue further. So many times we see that later on down the line, the husband and wife are ready to reconcile. But because the parents on either side brought in so much of their own baggage into the dynamic, that now it becomes impossible to reconcile. There's just too much that has been said. There's just too much that has happened. Now the parents on either side give them an ultimatum that if you choose to go back, then we're disowning you, which is wrong, but that's what happens. So when there is when you've exhausted all internal mechanisms, then you go outside, but to the right person, and also to the right way. I always say, look at that woman who came to complain to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about her husband. And we all know the room of Aisha radiallahu anha is so small. You know, when you go to Medina Munawwara, you see how it is. And Aisha radiallahu anha was in the room. Now this woman could have said, well, okay, I mean, I'm not in the masjid, I'm not in the public. Let me speak openly and freely. No, she didn't want even Aisha radiallahu anha to hear. She whispered the complaint in the ears of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to the point that Aisha radiallahu anha didn't know what she was saying. It was only when the revelation came afterwards, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. So, your friends, your siblings, your parents, they don't need to know the nitty-gritty of what's happening in your marriage, both positive and both negative, because it complicates things. When there is a need for them to know, then you tell them to the extent that they are required to know. And when there's a need for intervention, then you go outside the parameters, but to the right people.
Staying on the subject of hasad, nazar, jealousy, another very hot topic that we're seeing in our communities and in the world at the moment is social media. Social media has created sometimes very unrealistic expectations. We've seen people getting married and you'll see the halls and a whole lot of things happening like that. Then you'll see unrealistic things happening. How can Muslims safeguard, how do we safeguard ourselves from something like this?
You know, it's interesting that you asked that question. Just this morning, I was sitting at the office and one of my colleagues posted on our group, you know, some clip that's going viral about a wedding recently. And before I get to the other things that I want to say, sometimes you look at what's happening at these weddings and you say, Allah, how do we justify this in light of what's happening in Gaza? I'm not saying we mustn't live, right? I'm not saying that don't eat nice food, don't wear nice clothes, don't go for holiday, don't enjoy yourself because of what's happening in Gaza. But this kind of wanton, you know, extravagance, this flaunting, it boggles the mind. Gaza aside, right? Allah likes to see the effects of the bounties that He has blessed you with being manifest. So if Allah has given you a decent amount of wealth, you don't wear torn and tattered clothing. If Allah has given you wealth, you don't eat bread and jam for every meal. But Allah doesn't like extravagance. And Allah doesn't like that you do things to show off. So a wedding or a walima is not a mayyat house. You don't expect people to be somber. Yeah, okay. You know how they serve food at a mayyat house. People are talking in hushed tones. You don't want to get too informal because it may come across as insensitive to the bereaved families. No, of course. Even in the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's a moment of happiness. You express happiness, you express joy, but everything within limits. We are an ummah of moderation. Not that you put yourself in debt. Or if you've got enough and you're not putting yourself in debt, but now you're doing things to show off. Now you're doing things to compete. Now you're doing things to one up. You know, somebody else in the family had a function, so we have to be one above them. Now you're doing things simply to keep up with the Jonases. This obsession with certain wedding venues, even though it's 10 times the price, simply because, I don't know, it's made out of glass or because it's got a garden setting. No, I'm not borrowing money from anybody. I want to do it for my daughter. Sure, but what are the parameters? And you've got to carry on checking what is your intention. Now, when we do all of these things, right, and then we want to display it on social media, ask yourself why. Why? What's the reason? Whoever was invited are the people closest to you. Family, friends, acquaintances, colleagues. They saw what they saw. The best camera is the camera of the eye. The best hard drive is your own memory stick upstairs, right? So they saw, they'll enjoy it. They enjoyed the moment. 30 years later, they'll tell your children, you know what, I remember the day your mother got married. I remember the day your father got married. They came in this car and your mother had this color dress and your father had that color that. And that's it. What more do you want? Because once you're wanting to project it on social media, it means you want to show off. It means you want to unnecessarily display, right? I'm not saying everybody who does it does with that intention, but there's very few then. Because if you look at the manner in which it is projected, some people do it for business reasons. Fine, you're a caterer, you're doing decor, all of that. You put those things there because you want to show people what you're capable of doing, and you do it for business reasons. But why do you want to do this? Then you say, oh, now see what happened. Of course, sometimes people don't have a bad intention, but the nazar falls. Nazar is not only with a bad intention. Hasad then is going to develop when you flaunt all the bounties of Allah upon you. Why you want to show what I get so irritated, Muhammad, when people, instead of saying Bismillah wa barakatillah and tucking in, just take a picture. Put it on status. Even if it's not a wedding, I mean, you go out for a meal on the weekend with your family. So enjoy the meal. Let it delight your palate. Why must it delight somebody else's eyes? Then the next morning you say, now, oh, I got running stomach. So we need to be careful about the social media aspect in terms of the actual function. But beyond that, in marriage itself, right? So you and your spouse are on an exotic destination, go and enjoy yourself. Why must you take, scuba diving today, paragliding tomorrow, bungee jumping the next day? Now who's watching? Your cousin who can't pay rent. And then, all that negativity breeds. And then you say, you see people are jealous. But you are provoking that jealousy. Your husband bought you a new car. Your wife bought you a new watch. Enjoy it. You don't have to display everything. It's between you and your spouse and Allah. Now when we have grievances, then you don't take shots at each other on your WhatsApp status. I mean, really, that's immature. It's immature. The whole world must know now. We had a tiff, and it's cryptic, and it's coded. So those who know, they know. Those who don't know, they don't know, and they're trying to figure it out. Is she upset with the husband? Is she upset with the sister? Nah, I think. Well, what is that? What is that? I mean, sit down as adults and speak. And if you don't want to speak, then don't speak. Right? If you want to give each other the cold shoulder, then give it. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying it's healthy. But rather do that than trying to get at each other via cryptic, kind of messaging on your WhatsApp status and on your Instagram stories and memes and that kind of thing. What does that resolve? Really, what does it resolve? You're being childish, you're being immature, and you just then bringing unnecessary attention onto the marriage.
Yeah, it's every morning you wake up so many times and you look at people's status and exactly what you said. Okay, who's the tough with today? And it's becoming more and more common, unfortunately. Whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on WhatsApp, where now it's even on TikTok, people are making videos about it. My next question would be the importance of communication. I know women and many brides would like more open communications from their husbands, and sometimes men tend to keep things in, and at one point everything comes out. How important is it to have that open communication throughout and not just explode at one go?
See, everyone will agree that communication is important. So that's not the issue. It's not like anyone feels that it is not important to communicate. I think where the problem is we don't understand that everyone doesn't communicate in the same way. So fundamentally, there's a difference between the way men and women communicate. That's why they've written books like what Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus and all that kind of thing. But as an example, women communicate to vent and men communicate to find solutions. So if you had a bad day at work, right, with your boss, with your employees, with your service provider, client, whatever, your wife won't have a solution if she doesn't understand your work. So when you come home, you won't talk about it as a male, because you're looking for a solution. You're only willing to talk about something if it's going to be solution orientated, right? You would retreat, men retreat to their caves. So when you come home and you had a bad day and you don't know how to solve it, that tomorrow doesn't become a worse day, you're going to slouch on the couch, you're going to hit the remote, or you're going to go to the bedroom and just want to relax. Now at that time, the worst thing that the wife can do is say, communication. What's wrong, my darling? What's wrong, my darling? And you don't want to talk about it because you know talking to her about it is going to be of no use, because she doesn't even know who your client is, or she doesn't even know who your service provider is, who's pushing back the deadline or whatever the case may be. Communication there is not necessarily verbal from a wife's perspective. She needs to come and just make you comfortable, offer you a cup of tea, not talk too much, talk less, maybe give you a massage, give you a foot rub. Let's reverse the example, right? You come home and you see, lemons are for sale. Now you think, as a man, that, you know what, let me give her a space. She's in the kitchen. Mood is off. Let me go and sit in the bedroom. That's the worst mistake you can make. Because a woman needs to communicate to ventilate her feelings. So, okay, my darling, what's wrong? No, you know what? The domestic burnt my cloak. That one, I made 7 tawafs in the Zamzam towers to find it. Now, what do you do as a man? You say, okay, fire her then. And she gives you the stay. And she doesn't say anything. Couple of months down the line, you come home, same thing. Why are you upset? Oh, she burnt another cloak. But I told you the last time, fire. And then she tells you, you don't understand. And you scratch your head and you say, but I'm offering a solution. That's the problem. She doesn't want to communicate because she wants a solution. She just wants you to listen, to sympathize. My darling, amen, not that cloak. Don't worry, okay, my brother is going for Umrah. I'll tell him to get you another one. She just wants you to listen. She just needs someone to understand what she's feeling. She doesn't want your solution. She knows what the solution is. So you need to understand that. That's how a woman communicates. A woman needs to understand that a man at times just doesn't want to speak. That at that moment, communication must take other shapes and forms. Let's say now, in terms of communication, that there's a tiff in the marriage. The last thing you do is you try to communicate when you're angry. It doesn't work. Because a person is hyper emotional. And at that time, they say the wrong things. And they're not thinking clearly, right? They're not thinking in a balanced way. Wait for things to cool down. Then find a neutral setting and have some rules. Listen, you speak for 5 minutes and I won't interrupt you. Then I speak for 5 minutes and you don't interrupt me. Then you offer 3 solutions and I offer 3 solutions. And if we conclude on an agreeable one, well and good. If not, we both think about it. Read some durood before you start. Make dua before you start. Don't generalize. You never. You always. Those are big problems. Because as soon as you say you never, and if they can prove that they did it once, it becomes argument. You always, if they can disprove it once, then it becomes a problem. So leave out the generalizations, leave out the exaggerations, leave out the high-pitched tone and the screaming and the shouting. Talk like adults. Hold hands. Look at each other in the eyes. Make an intention from before that I'm going to communicate what I feel, but I'm going to listen. I'm going to keep an open mind. I think I'm right, but I could perhaps be wrong. Right? And if you do that, Allah would put barakah in the process and you're able to communicate. Then maybe if you have to jot down, a few decisions that you have taken. Sometimes maybe you feel I can't express myself verbally in the moment, then write out a message and send it to your spouse. But send it at the right time and communicate to them. I'm sending you this thing. I want you to read it. I want you to think about it. And after 3 days, we'll sit and we'll have this particular discussion. That's a more mature and constructive. I'm just giving you the broad strokes, right? Then each person and each couple can work out the operational mechanics for themselves in terms of what works for them better. But the things that we should and shouldn't do, revolve and pivot around some of those fundamentals.
Moulana, we've run out of time once again, Jazakallah. I think the advice is good for, as you mentioned at the beginning of the program, for those getting married, those who are married, and those thinking about getting married. And I think the most important thing that I've taken out is the topic of taqwa. Because if we do have the taqwa in our marriage, we have the Allah consciousness, inshallah everything else will work out. And from my side, I request a dua from you. Inshallah, I'll be getting married soon.
Inshallah, Allah grant barakah.
Ameen.
And happiness, inshallah.
Ameen. To our viewers out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. I think once again with Moulana, it's always really, really valuable advices that we can take, practical advice that we can take to make our lives easier and the lives of our spouses, because sometimes we want to take the advice for ourselves and use it in a way. But Moulana Ravat said we must do this. Moulana said we must do that. Let's work together as spouses, and inshallah our marriages will be marriages filled with barakah, filled with love, and filled with happiness. Moulana, jazakallah.
Barakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
So viewers out there, till next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.